Method of completing the square. Example 1, we are asked to use completing the square method to solve the quadratic expression x squared plus x minus 3 is equal to 0. If you remember, what we did here, we had to look for a term that we added to x squared plus 12x to make it a perfect square. That term that is added is what we refer to as completing the square. So you have to add something to make it complete. So if you have an equation in this form, 1, looking at it, it is not a perfect square. 2, it cannot be factorized using factorization method. So what do you do? Questions like this gave birth to completing the square method. So what we are going to do is we are going to take the constant term to the left-hand side and then use completing the square method on the left-hand side. So what I mean by that is this. Solution, we have x squared plus x minus 3 is equal to 0. Adding 3 to both sides, you have x squared plus x is equal to 3. Adding 3 to both sides gave us x squared plus x is equal to 3. Now, in order for us to make the left-hand side a perfect square, we need to look for half the coefficient of x, square it, and add it to both sides. First and foremost, what is the coefficient of x? The coefficient of x, which is this, is said to be plus 1. So half of plus 1 is 1 over 2, which is half. Square it. When you square it, it will give you 1 over 4. Now, this 1 over 4, you have to add it to both sides. When you do, it gives you a perfect square. So when you add it, it becomes x squared plus x plus 1 over 4 is equal to 3 plus 1 over 4. Why am I adding it to both sides? Being an equation, whatever you do to one side, you must also do to the other side. Otherwise, it changes the sense of the equation. They are no longer equal. So in order for them to remain equal, you have to add it to both sides. So this becomes an equation, a perfect square. We can now factorize it using the knowledge in making quadratic expressions perfect square. So this can be expressed as x squared plus x plus 1 over 2 all squared is equal to 3 plus 1 over 4. So this can be expressed as x squared plus, if you factorize out 2 from here, you have 2 into bracket half x plus 1 over 2 squared to be equal to 3 plus 1 over 4. So factorizing this, which is a perfect square, it now gives us x plus 1 over 2 squared is equal to, let's solve this. This is, the LCM is 4. So this is 3 and 3 1/4. That is 12 plus 1 is 13. So this is 13 over 4. So since we have gotten this, we can then solve this. Remember what we did in solving quadratic expressions with irrational roots. So you then have to find the square root of both sides. And find the square root of both sides gives us x plus half is equal to plus or minus square root of 13 over 4. And x plus half is said to be equal to plus or minus, this is root 13 divided by root 4. And root 4 is the perfect square. We have x to be equal to minus half plus or minus root 13 divided by square root of 4 is 2. So x now will be equal to minus half plus root 3 over 2, or minus half minus root 13 over 2. So our value for x is equal to this. Since the denominators are the same, you have minus 1 plus root 13 divided by 2, or minus 1 minus root 13 divided by 2. So this is how you can factorize a quadratic equation using completing the square method. Kindly like my videos as you watch. While I recommend that you subscribe to my channel if you are yet to do so, and also follow me on Facebook and on TikTok at my Latin Teacher Maths. Turn on the notification bell so as to be notified whenever a new video is being uploaded. You can also use the comment section to interact with me on areas that are still difficult for you to understand. While I recommend you share the link with your friends and families so that they can also benefit from our daily classes. I will take 2 more examples so that you get to understand completing the square method more. Example 2, we are asked to solve the equation 5p squared minus 5 is equal to 2p using completing the square method. So I'm going to simplify this. Solution. We have 5p squared minus 5 is equal to 2p. This is 5p squared minus, when you take it to the other side, minus 2p minus 5 is equal to 0. So this cannot be factorized using factorization method. So what we are going to do is to use completing the square method. The first step is to move the constant term to the other side of the equation, or you make the coefficient of x p squared to be 1, because we want to make it a perfect square. So you divide both sides by, you divide all through by 5. So this gives us p squared minus 2 over 5p minus 5 over 5, and 5 over 5 is 1, is equal to 0. Then you move the constant term to the other side of the equation. You have p squared minus 2 over 5p is equal to 1. The next step is to look for half the coefficient of p. Half the coefficient of p, or the coefficient of p, is minus 2 over 5. Halving it means you have to multiply by half, or you have to divide by 2, and this gives you 1 over 5 minus 1 over 5. Square it. When you square minus 1 over 5, you have plus 1 over 25. So you can leave it as 1 over 5 squared, or 1 over 25. So then add it to both sides to make it a perfect square. You now have p squared minus 2 over 5p plus, I'm going to add this as 1 over 5 squared, is equal to 1 plus 1 over 25, which is still the same thing as this. Now, expressing this, the middle term, to be in form of 2pq or 2xy, you now have this to be p squared minus 2 into 1 over 5p plus 1 over 5 squared is equal to 1 whole number 1 over 25. Then you can factorize this. Since it is now a perfect square, this becomes p minus 1 over 5 all squared is equal to 25 times 1 is 25 plus 1 is 26. So you have 26 over 25. Finding the square root of both sides, you have p minus 1 over 5 is equal to plus or minus square root of 26 over 25, and P is equal to 1 over 5 plus or minus square root of 26 divided by square root of 25, and P is equal to 1 over 5 plus or minus root 26 divided by 5. For square root of 25 is 5. Since the denominators are the same, you have P to be equal to 1 plus or minus root 26 divided by 5. Since root 26 is an irrational number, you then have P to be equal to 1 plus root 26 divided by 5, or 1 minus root 26 divided by 5. So this is the solution to the quadratic equation using completing the square method. So what you need to do in completing the square method, just to take the following steps. 1, when you have the equation, move the constant term to the right hand side of the equation. If the coefficient of p squared is not 1, you have to ensure that the coefficient of p is a perfect square. So if it is not the perfect square, as in this case, it is not a perfect square because 5 is not a perfect square. So I have to divide all through by 5, and I have 1, and 1 is a perfect square because the square root of 1 is still 1. So that's why we always divide it by the coefficient of the first term if the coefficient of the first term is not 1 or a perfect square. So dividing through by 5, we got this, and then you move the constant term to the other side of the equation. Find half the coefficient of p, square it, which I did here, and then you add it to both sides. You're adding it to both sides because it is an equation. You don't add it to one side and leave the other. Otherwise, the equation is not balanced. So in order for it to be balanced, you have to add it to both sides. Then you have to make the left-hand side a perfect square, which I have already showed you that it must be in the form of x squared minus 2xy plus y squared, and then you factorize. You factorize it into x minus y all squared, and then you simplify by finding the square root of both sides, and then you simplify. So that is how you can get this. Let's take example 3. Example 3 says we should solve the quadratic equation by completing the square method. So if you are unable to follow up in the first 2 examples, I believe this should be an easy ride for you. Solution: x squared plus 8x minus 7 is equal to 0. First thing first, ensure the first term is a perfect square. Yes. The last term is a perfect square. No. So we move the constant term to the other side of the equation. This becomes x squared plus 8x is equal to 7. So what is the next step? The next step is to look for half the coefficient of x. The coefficient of x is plus 8. Half of 8 is 4. Square it, it gives you 16. Then add it to both sides. This becomes x squared plus 8x plus 4 squared is equal to 7 plus 16. I decided to leave it as 4 squared, for 4 squared is still 16. So next thing to do is to factorize the left hand side. You can factorize it as it is, like this, and this will be equal to root x plus 4 all squared is equal to 7 plus 16 is 23. Next to do is find the square root of both sides. This becomes x plus 4 is equal to plus or minus root 23. So x is equal to minus 4 plus or minus root 23. and x is equal to minus 4 plus root 23 or minus 4 minus root 23. So you have the root to be an irrational root. That brings us to the end of today's class. In today's class, we have been able to take the second method in solving quadratic equations, which we said it is completing the square method. And completing the square method is normally used when the quadratic equations cannot be solved using factorization method or graphical methods. So once you can't use those two methods to solve it, the next available method to use is the completing the square method. And in completing the square method, we said it is to make the imperfect square to become a perfect quadratic expression. Before you go, let me leave you with this assignment. You're asked to solve the equation a squared plus 8a plus 15 is equal to 0 using completing the square method. So I have already solved 3 examples for you. So all you need to do is just to follow them up and see how you can use them in solving this assignment. Now what you will do is ensure the first term is a perfect square, which actually it is. Since the last term is not a perfect square or the constant term, you move it to the other side of the equation. Moving it to the other side of the equation, it becomes minus 15. Next is to look for half the coefficient of a, and the coefficient of a is 8. Half of it is 4. Square it and add to both sides. Then you can then simplify until you get your value for a. Kindly like my videos as you watch. Well, I recommend that you subscribe to my channel if you are yet to do so. And also follow me on Facebook and on TikTok at my lesson teacher Max. Turn on the notification bell so as to be notified whenever a new video is being uploaded. You can also use the comment section to interact with me on areas that are still difficult for you to understand. While I recommend you share the link with your friends and families so that they can also benefit from our daily classes. Thank you for being patient to the end of this class. See you in our next class. Do have a nice day.